afterwards. If you've got any questions at any point, just stop me, and I'd be happy to try to answer them. The first thing in presenting your data, whether you're going to be giving a poster presentation or a talk, is you need to know your audience. And if you haven't been to a meeting before, if you don't know who's going to be in the audience, then ask the organizers, the people who are getting you together to go. Because you have to pitch your presentation to the audience. It's an absolutely fatal mistake if you don't think about it. So if you're working in a chem lab and you're going to a place where it's going to be psychologists, mathematicians, other people, you have to know what level to pitch it at. Is it going to be a lay audience? Is it going to be scientists just from chemistry? Or is it going to be a mixed group of scientists? This is really, really crucial. One of my first experiences, it was really funny. I did my graduate research on the control of sexual behavior in guinea pigs. And so we had a research conference we went to every year called the Eastern Conference on Reproductive Behavior. Everybody there did research on sex and paternal and maternal behavior. That was it. And so everybody was used to talking about intermissions, ejaculations, no big deal. The year I graduated, I went and gave a talk at animal behavior. I had a following of men the entire conference. All the guys from the lab were trying to protect me from these other folks because they thought, women who talk about sex? Oh God, this is very exciting. So you need to think really hard about who you're pitching your talk to, because this is the absolutely most crucial thing in giving a good presentation. Who's your audience and how do you get them excited about your work? Catchy title. This can be a plus or minus. Once again, it's know your audience. If you're giving a job talk, then you don't go for the really catchy title necessarily. You go for a more scientific one. But if you're just giving an informal presentation somewhere, then a less formal, more catchy title is often a good way to start. The introduction is absolutely crucial. You have to catch your audience's interest. If you don't, your entire presentation is a lost cause. So you have to let the audience know what's the crucial gap in knowledge that you are trying to investigate. And why is it important? Why is it interesting to them, not just to you? In talking about methods in presentations, unlike manuscripts for publication, method sections in both posters and in oral presentations are usually abbreviated. Particularly if your work is unpublished, you oftentimes don't want to give them all of your methodology because you don't want to be scooped. And this is a big thing when you're in graduate school. I've seen a lot of graduate students go to conferences, talk to people about the things they're working on, only to have those people go and publish it before they did. So you have to be very, very careful in talking to people not to give too much away. If your project involves multiple procedures on multiple days, then it's really good if you can make a timeline. And that, because a picture's worth 1,000 words. So if you can give a timeline of, okay, the animals came in, they were habituated, they got treatment A on this day, they got treatment B on that day, we did these tests, and you give this whole thing. And once again, it's really, really important to keep things in logical order. And for the most case, logical order is always in terms of the order in which things happen, chronological order. But a lot of times, the first time students present, they sort of go from here to there and back and forth, and it gets everybody confused. For the results section, to the extent possible, format your graphs as similarly as possible. So it's easy. Once you've explained the graphs once, you don't have to explain them again. But take time with your first graph to go through it. Show them what are you graphing on the x-axis, what are you graphing on the y-axis, and what do the different bars mean. And if you change what you're graphing on the x and y axes, go through this again. You understand your data, but the audience doesn't. So you have to take the time to really make it clear to them what's being graphed The other thing that's different about presentations as opposed to journal articles is typically it's better to discuss your results as you have the graph up rather than waiting to the end. Yes, at the end you'll draw some conclusions, but talk to them about the implications of the work as they see the graph so they can make that connection in their head. In terms of discussion and conclusions, keep it short and simple. A bulleted list is usually the best way to go. Make sure you've got your acknowledgments in there, that you acknowledge all of the grant support. So in your case, it means acknowledging the support you're receiving through SPUR, through the RCMI grant, but also any of the grants that are being used in your home lab. And then, of course, all of the people in the lab that are helping you with the research. Font size, whether you're doing a poster or you're doing a PowerPoint, you have to have it in a readable size. For posters, you generally don't want to go below an 18, and anything above is much better. But 18 is your absolutely smallest. The big conference I go is the Society for Neuroscience. This is 15,000 presentations running from Saturday through Wednesday. So figure out 15,000 presentations. Typically, you have a couple hundred you want to look at. Your eyes are going crazy, by the second day. So you have to make sure that the font size is readable, not just to you, somebody with good vision, younger person, but somebody older, whose vision may not be so good. The lighting in the conference center may not be that good. You want to make sure that that's good. You also want to make sure your poster's not a glaring poster, depending on the type of paper that you have available for making up posters. Some of them can be pretty bad, so you have to pick your colors carefully. Choose your color combinations carefully, and Peter will show you some examples of this in terms of PowerPoint. You don't want to be too bright, but you need to have good contrast between your print and your background. And if you're going to be giving a PowerPoint, make sure that you check it out on screen, because something that looks really fantastic on your computer when it's projected can either look washed out or just really be disconcerting, and the color combination isn't what you thought it was, on your computer. The same thing goes typically when you get your poster printed. They'll give you a small one. Check it out. Make sure that the colors are what you want, because they'll usually let you adjust it if it's not. Another thing you need to watch out for is when you go from one computer to another, when you go from your computer to getting a poster printed, oftentimes symbols and bullets will change. If they don't have the same fonts in the computer that you're going to, they'll pick another font. One of the times, I tend to use little triangles as my bullets, and I often make them like hot pink. Well, I came out one time with little hot pink, and from my vision, it looked like little hot pink uteruses. I'm a behavioral endocrinologist. Turned out to be little pink muscle men. That's what the PowerPoint thing was. How it got from little triangles to little muscle men, I don't know, but it did. And this can be disconcerting. So if you're giving a PowerPoint, if you can give it from your own computer, that usually works better. If you can't give it from your computer, make sure you've got everything in one folder, because otherwise it's going to be looking for hyperlinks that are back on your computer. So the whole time you're making up a PowerPoint, drag everything into a folder and then paste it in from there. Do all your hyperlinks from there, because otherwise you can run into trouble. If you have to take a PowerPoint on a flash drive, make sure your flash drive has no viruses before you take it. This has been a big problem this year with all the viruses going around. So people have gotten to conferences, they've got viruses on their flash drive that people won't let them put it on the computer. The other thing you can do to back it up is put it somewhere on the internet so that you could download it, when you get to the talk site. So if you have trouble with your flash drive, you've got a backup. You've got it somewhere on the internet. You can retrieve it. Dress appropriately. You want to be taken seriously as a scientist. dress like a scientist. This doesn't mean you have to be stodgy. It doesn't mean it necessarily suit and tie. It just means, neat, clean, and not too many body parts showing. I've gone to talks where, people have their navels out, other things. It's just not appropriate if you want to be taken seriously. Be confident. Typically, you're the one person in the room who knows more about the subject than anybody else. So, you know the work, go through it, make sure, you've been through the presentation. If you're giving a poster, then, give it to everybody in your lab. They also know a lot about it, so they'll know the questions to ask you. But also try giving it to a couple people who know nothing about the subject, because they'll give you feedback about whether you haven't explained things appropriately. But just, typically when people come to a poster, after their 4th day of looking at all of these posters, they'll say, okay, give me the song and dance. Give me your run-through. So have a 5-minute, quick run-through you can give to everybody using your, don't read your poster, but, be able to walk it through. Same thing for a PowerPoint. Be able to walk it through and make sure you stick to the time limits. If it's a 15-minute presentation, keep rehearsing it. I'll just take, my printouts of my slides and rehearse it when I'm on the bus going home. Make sure that I've got that 15 minutes down. Because it's bad. You don't want to go 20, but you don't want to go 10 either. Because I tend to motor mouth. Once I get started, just keep on ripping. So it's also good to look at your watch while you're giving it to make sure you're timing things appropriately so you won't end too quickly, too slowly. Another thing with first-time presenters is you're usually nervous. 2 things you can do to try to keep the nerves down. Number 1 is when you get to the podium or when somebody walks up to you and they ask you for their spiel, take 3 deep breaths. The actual act of breathing and taking really deep breaths calms yourself. So it gets you going. Then you keep on breathing. This is always a good way to proceed. The other thing is if you're giving a talk, if you're really nervous about it, don't focus on anybody in the audience. Keep looking around the audience. It's bad to just focus on one spot. Keep looking around, but just scan. Don't focus on people. And that usually lets you sort of get into it before you start looking. I learned that one because when I was giving my thesis presentation, my mentor kept giving me these dirty looks. I mean, what's wrong? What am I doing wrong? At the end, he told me, you did a fantastic job. I couldn't tell that from the faces he was making. I thought I was completely making a terrible mess of it. So I just learned, if I'm in a new situation, to pretend I'm looking at people, but not look directly. And then the other thing you'll find is that you'll find a nodder. You'll find a couple of nodders in it that are really happy with. So look at them. Make sure in terms of writing style, there are a couple of quick hints. Number 1, make sure you define everything at first use. I mean, even things that you might think are very common abbreviations are in your field can also be common abbreviations in another field. So if a mathematician's coming up to you, they think it means one thing and you think it means something else. So make sure you define absolutely every abbreviation at first use. The logical order. You know a lot about the problem. Your audience knows only what you tell them. If you tell them things in the most logical fashion, like I said, chronological order is usually your best bet. It makes things much easier for them to understand. If they can understand it, they think you're smart. They think they're smart. Everybody's happy. If you make things confusing, then it's going to be harder to sell your science. In many ways, good scientific writing is like telling a good story. You want to make it interesting. You want to make it easy to understand. The thing that I find with people who come into a science program is they don't know about scientific writing. Usually, they've either come out of a journalistic background, so they want everything short, really short paragraphs, or they want the more common thing is creative writing. So they want these really long sentences, really convoluted. This is not the way to write science. And the easiest sort of instruction I've seen over the years is what they call SVO word order. Subject, verb, object. And it takes fewer words to get the idea across. And the other thing they've shown is that not only takes fewer words, it's much easier for the audience to comprehend. And just to give you some examples. And it also gets rid of passive voice. And passive voice used to be the way that science was written, and now most journals don't want to see a passive voice. So for example, direct order is hormone priming activates high levels of lordosis behavior, as opposed to high levels of lordosis behavior are activated by hormone priming. It takes you just one more, you got to sort of switch the words around, and then the brain says, ah, yeah, I know what you mean. And you want to keep things simple. Typically, you don't want really long sentences. It's better to have 2 short ones than 1 long one. There are exceptions to the rule. Typically, you talk about almost everything in past tense. Whenever you're talking about published data, whenever you're talking about a study that you've completed, it's past tense. You don't go into past perfect. You don't go into present. Present tense is only used for things that have been shown in several studies, that they're well established. But for the most part, you stick to simple past tense, and your life is good. It makes things easier for people. Any questions?